then, as I mentioned, we're going to use Plotly for this exercise. And the first thing that I'm going to build, it's almost like an empty canvas where we're going to start filling the information inside Plotly or inside the dashboard. So as you can imagine, we're going to use Dash, and that's a library. And I have already installed Dash. I'm not quite sure why it's requiring. I have already installed Dash. I don't know why it's requiring the Dash to be installed. At some point, this is when you have a message like this, it means that the module has not been installed, but it will disappear in a bit. I think it's still detecting whether the module is installed for that particular environment, whether the library is installed for that particular environment. So if I actually switch back to visualization, yeah, that's it. Yes, so I needed to go into settings and select the right environment. And as you can see in this environment, I have quite a few things installed: Dash, I have NumPy, I have Pandas, and scikit-learn, Seaborn, and Matplotlib. Right. So we imported Dash, and in Dash, in order to create an app and a web app, and in this case, what I was showing you here, it's this is what ultimately we would like to achieve. So we can create an app by stating, let's call the app, and we can call Dash, and in Dash, we can give a name to the dashboard. In this case, let's call it simulation dashboard, right? So nothing is really happening there, but there are two things that we need to give now to the app. We need to provide a layout, and there is a small level of knowledge that you require in order to work with Dash. And for that, for knowledge in terms of HTML, because ultimately when you're creating the dashboard, HTML is more or less the language that is in the middle of Dash and the dashboard. You don't need to write HTML code, but understanding HTML code is essential for you to build the dashboard. So if I go into Dash, and there is something called HTML components, and we have to create some divisions like this one. In fact, let me copy straight away this, and as I develop the dashboard, let's put the new dashboard. Let's create this layout here. This is not the one that we're going to use, just to illustrate. Now this format that we are specifying here, which is an HTML and the divisions in the HTML, and we need to specify those into the layout of the app. And so we can say that basically it's going to be our layout. And the other thing that I'm going to do is make sure that this it's running on a different port. So actually, let me stop the other dashboard that I have here. Let me stop this. And let's run this new dashboard that we're creating for the session. This one happens behind the scenes. Something is not working quite as I was expecting. Let's see again. Patient with this. Oh, there is something going on here with the. Just delete this comment there. So as I run this, it seems that it ran, but it didn't actually created the app as such. So let's make sure that this runs as a server. So app run server. Let's see if that works now. There we go. So if I click on the button there, so I have now my new information there and hello dashboard. So let's put this side by side. And interesting things. The interesting thing is that let's say I want to change the size of this text, and let's call it welcome to this dashboard. And as I save this, and I'm changing the size of the text instead of a paragraph, this is an H2. And this is what I'm talking about, understanding a bit of what's happening with the in terms of HTML markup language. So as you can see, I'm using some of the markup language in HTML, and the website, in their website, they explain the equivalence of doing this in Dash, which is the Python code, and the equivalence of having this in HTML code. So it's very, very similar. So now if I rerun that, I'm not quite sure. Okay, let me save the file. If I rerun that, let's see if that works. Yeah, so you can see that now this is updated. So welcome to this dashboard. Okay, so obviously we want to do something more interesting than that, and that's just a markup language that we can use. And let's do something more interesting. I'm going to delete all this layout that I have here. Okay. So it's going to be a completely new one, empty layout. I'm not quite sure for what reason. And the other thing that I can do is, instead of running the file, I can cancel. I can run in debug mode. So now it's running in debug, and I will show you in a bit what are the benefits of running in debug. So there is nothing here. And let's create our first component. So this is again my HTML H1, and I'm going to create here one text that says this is my reservoir simulation dashboard. Okay, and I think one important thing, it's as you can see, the debug mode is off, and as you're developing the dashboard, it's good to have the debug mode on, or debug is equal true actually. Let's see if that works. Now, there we go, result simulation dashboard, and let's start to add more information. The next thing that I want to do is add a drop down. So going back to the dashboard, this is the dashboard that I initially showed is not working anymore because I need to make sure. Let me make sure that I switch this to another port. So I'm going to open this in another port. So this is a port 8051, and you will see what's the difference here. So if I go back to a simulation dashboard that I initially, this is the actual simulation dashboard with everything. Let's run that. Okay, so let's see, this is a original dashboard. This is what we want to achieve, the dashboard that we want to achieve. And I want to add some of these drop downs as on this dashboard. This is loading, still loading. And there is a lot going on in my machine at the moment. It's a bit slow. And as you can see, I can run multiple codes at the same time. I have the original simulation dashboard, and I have this dashboard, and I can switch back between those two sessions, between these two files. So I want to add this sort of debugging. I want to add this drop down in this dashboard, and in order to do that, I need to hold on a second. Let me turn off the arrows here. Let me go back here. And as I mentioned, this the dashboard that we're building, the new one, it's on port 8051. Okay. So the complete dashboard is in the port 8050, and the new dashboard is in the port 8051, as I show you here. So if I want to add a drop down, the drop down is actually not in the HTML components. The drop down is in the dash core component, and I will import this as a dash cc. So if I do dcc dot, and as you can see, there are quite a few functionalities, data pickers, graphs, and so on. I'm going to use the drop down, and in the drop down, I have if I go there, you can see you need to define the ID of the drop down, which is just a name, and the options, we need to pass the options. So if I go to the dash documentation, dash core components, okay, so let's see, let's for instance add this drop down from the example on the dash website. So if I add that, let's see here, yeah, so you can see here now the drop down is there. And also, I think at some point it actually auto refreshes as I start to write code. But let me rerun the new dashboard. So as you can see, that I have the options here, and I can select the options. And what we would like to get here, it's some of the simulation properties that I want to visualize. So I'm going to make a couple of fast track information, or I'm going to copy some code from some other files. But here I am going to define this dictionary. And this is a quantity dictionary where I have the name of a variable on the database, and I have what is the actual name that I want to display on the dashboard. Yes, Anki, Dash compares to Power BI. There are some functionalities that you can have from Power BI. And of course, there are so much more things that you could do, because you are not relying only on the visuals that you have in Power BI, but you can rely on the whole Plotly and some other libraries, and you have a whole. There are powerful functionalities that you have when you use HTML and the styling that you can benefit in Dash. And the other thing is that you can publish and share your dashboard. Once it's ready, you can publish and share widely to anyone within your organization or outside your organization.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So I have this dictionary, and again, I can put a breakpoint here, and if I run this again, this runs again, and I can inspect the properties. For instance, I can hover on this, and I can visualize that is an actual class dictionary, and I can see what is in that dictionary, and I can carry on with the program running, and that's it. But now I want to replace this dropdown with this information here, and as you can see, the format is label and value. In this case, I'm going to create a dropdown options 1, because we will create 3 other dropdowns, and we want to have this function, a list of these dictionaries. Yes. So I'm going to put label New York, and I'm going to say for key and value in this dictionary. I'm going to iterate. Oops, what happened there? I'm going to iterate on that dictionary. And this is going to be called items. And as you can see, it helps me to autocomplete it. When I was writing dot, it detected that it was a dictionary, and it gave me the options for the dictionary, in this case, items. So now I want to get the value, which in this case, this is a key, this is a value. I want to get a list of every one of those in the format label and value. I want to get this value, put it here, and I'm going to get this value, put it here. And now if I save again, as you can see, it's the debugger is trying to run every time that it detects a change. It takes a bit of time, but it tries to run it again. So as you can see, it's at the moment it's trying to rerun the file and checking that there was a change. Okay, so with that change, there needs to be an update on the dashboard. Now the options that I'm going to put here, rather than this list here, I'm going to replace this list by the newly created list in here. Hopefully that should run. Yeah, as you can see, the debugger is it's running again, and this is refresh, and now I have the ratios here. So I want to select gas oil ratio and be able to later on select one variable here, filter from the database, and filter the simulation case that I want to get from the database automatically. So that's ultimately the point, but we'll get up to that point slowly. The other thing that I was showing you here in this select, there is, I want to put the list of variables that I want to filter. And remember that this list of variables that I want to filter comes from these values from these columns in the Excel. So I'm not going to load the Excel, but I know that my list of variables are the following ones. Let me put it in here. These are the list of variables that I want to filter. And I can add another drop down. And let me remind you that it's important to have IDs here. And I'm going to call this drop down 1. And there is a comma needed here. Interesting that PyCharm is always highlighting if there are errors. And that's very helpful as well, because you see that you don't have to run to realize that there is an error. So it helps a lot to see what's going on there. So I have an ID, and I'm going to copy this again. And actually, the default value that I want, it's the first item on the dictionary. And we can probably say that I want the drop down item 0 from the dictionary. And I want to create another drop down just underneath. Just make another comma here. I want to create another drop down which is a dashboard core component drop down. It's a drop down 2. And I'm going to put the input list filter as my options in the drop down. And my first value is as a property in the drop down. So if I save that, and hopefully that would detect that I have made a change. Going back to the drop down, let's see if that detects a change. Well, interestingly, there seems to be a problem here. I'm not quite sure what's happening here. Passing to drop down IDD to value, label, and value. Value passing to drop down, label, value. It seems that it didn't like that. Let me see if this value, if we comment this value. And the input filter, I think that the case with the input filter is that we need to have the same format as this one here. So I need to create another list for the input list filter, and let's call it drop down options 2. And this is, I'm going to iterate over the input list filter, get the value, and I'm going to use that in the drop down 2. Let's see if that helps. And let me comment this out. Okay. Case. Let me put this value out. And it will refresh in a second. So now I have 2 drop downs. One with the, I can select this name here, and I can select this other name here. And it's expecting to have like when it starts, it doesn't have a default name. This value here is to set up a default name. So I can set that default name. Actually, I want to use, for instance, .gor, because this is actually, I want to get this as my default name here, and as my default name here, I want to get the drop down. I want to get the case as my default name. Actually, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Let's take it from the dictionary. It's going to be taken from the dictionary, and this is going to be taken from the input list. And let's see if that works. It's refreshing. Now, as you can see, it's taking now the default values. There is a question here from Ibrahim. Can you expand on the question? When you can define the XX columns, what do you mean? You can use a microphone if you want. Well, yeah, I'm not quite sure what you mean with columns, but I'm not quite sure what you will bring with columns. If you're talking about how to order the layout, and we can use that as well, order the layout. And we can bring the column names. If you're talking about the data, yes, we can bring the columns names from the data. For instance, we can do something like, if you see the project, I have my Excel here in the project, and I can load that Excel. I can load that Excel. I can put, and we will need this later on. So I'm going to load that Excel, use pandas, and I'm going to read from pandas. And as you can see, it's not recognizing pandas, so I need to import pandas. On speedy, and now read Excel, and I'm going to read the file and the spreadsheet name. It's equal to this variable spreadsheet name. And yes, I could get, for instance, instead of using this input list, let's say I want to use this input list from the file. I can list all the df input columns and use that list instead. But the thing is, you will see that later on, I'm not going to use all those columns. Okay, there's something going on here with the file. Let's see if that works. Just putting an R in front of a file name, so it Python recognizes that all this string, it's everything after the R has to be read as a string format. So now you can see I have many more columns, and but I don't want to use all those columns. I want to use a few of them. I can drop them, but yes, we're going to use only these ones. Let me comment that line. Right. So far so good, and this is where it gets a bit more complicated, because we want to get a plot of a simulation results here. So I want to be able to select the plot, select the variable, and do at least a time or production gas oil ratio or production cumulative gas, the well prod cumulative gas production over time, and I want to make a plot here. And this is where I'm going to use Plotly here. So we have a layout. One thing that we can add here is the graph that we want to plot. So let's call here dcc.graph. And I'm going to call this graph 1. And so for just call it graph 1 as the ID. And that's it for the time being. And this is where the magic is going to start to happen here, because we need something called the callbacks, which as you see now, I have an empty graph there. So what I'm going to do is start to put some dummy data on this graph, and for that I'm going to use a callback. And this is where things starts to get more interesting with Dash. So as you can see, I have the plot here, and I want to be able to select buttonhole pressure or buttonhole pressure. Let me change that, buttonhole pressure. And I want to be able to change the content, the information in the plot based on what I'm selecting here above. For that, I need to import a bit more of methods to the file. So I'm going to import, or from dash.dependencies, I'm going to import output and input. And the way Dash works is I have this callback in which I can say I have some output. And in this case, the output is it tells you what is the component ID and what's the component property that you want to change. And in this case, the component ID is called the graph1. So I want to change my graph1, and I want to pass the figure. This is what is going to change. From the input, and what's happening with the input? Well, there are many inputs that we would like to change. So as it's many inputs, I can put together a list of inputs that I want to change. And in this case, let me put this more or less in line here. Or, let me do this. Yeah, so I can put an input, and again, I have to put the name of a component ID. In this case, I just want to pass the drop-down one, and I want to pass the information from the drop-down one, which is a value. I want to be able to get the value, and based on the value, get the name, change the properties of a plot here. Okay. So let me do. We can add multiple inputs here. I can also add another input here. But for the time being, let's just keep only one input affecting one output, and that's it. And within this this callback, I need to define a function, and this function is going to be the one executing the callback. And in this case, it's just let's call it update plot. And so this update plot will receive this value. And let's call it item 1 or value 1 if we want, or value, we can call it whatever we want. And this is where I need to update what's happening here. So whenever I change the drop down, sorry, I want to make sure that the graph is replotted. Okay. Okay. Now we need to know a bit about Plotly here. Plotly works in very similar way to, or let's put it this way. Plotly, it's another tool to visualize 2D plots, bar charts, histograms, and you name it. The only difference is that Plotly it's actually built on top of JavaScript, and there is an interface through Python. So every time that you code, you are actually producing a responsive graph, and that responsive graph has the properties of hovering. As you can see, there are some additional functionalities that it comes with Plotly. So it's you have interactive properties on that graph that you don't enjoy when you're working with Matplotlib. But let's say I want to use Plotly, and the first thing that I need to use to use Plotly is import some of the basic libraries from Plotly, and I'm going to import plotly.graph.objects, and or actually import this as geo or graph objects, and I'm going to create some Plotly graph objects. I'm going to try to do it as slow as I can, but there are a few things that probably I'm going to be jumping over. So the first thing that you need to have is for a Plotly, it's a layout. Well, let's see what we want to. This function, I want this function to return this whole figure updated. So every time I click here, I want to return this new figure. So let's first return something that is called a figure. Let's put it this way. So now let's define what is a figure. So the figure is actually a go. So from the Plotly library, I want to return this figure. I want to return some data. For the time being, let's call it traces. And I want to put a layout on that data. Let's try to do it without layout, and very simple. I want to put some traces. So those traces, let's build the traces. Again, it's I'm going to put a list here of what I would like to build. Excuse me if I need to remind a couple of things here. So I need to define a traces, a list of traces, and let me use or let's put the first trace here. Inside this trace, I'm going to put a go.scatter data scatter plot, and in the scatter, I can define x, and I'm going to put my x, it's 0, 10, 20, 30, and my y is 15, minus 20, 3, and 100. Just random numbers for the time being. So I included a trace, and with only one plot in x and y. And let's see if that works. I'm not sure if that is going to work, but let's see if that works. Let's run this again. Okay, something is happening there. See if I click here. Well, nothing seems to be returning as a figure there. And perhaps, let's see if this is actually running. So if I change here, Yeah, so that's not actually running. So what I want is when this drop down changes, I want to pass the value. And perhaps what's happening is that I am not executing I'm not using the value here. So let's see if I can pass the name. I think I can pass a name. And let's put that name equal to the value. Okay, quite helpful. Let's see if that works. Okay, it's refreshing. Yeah, for some reason it's not passing through there. So the idea is that if I change the input, which is the drop down one, as I change the drop down one, because then this function has to be executed. Not quite sure why it's not being executed. Oh, I see why. Because this has to be a decorator. I have to use a decorator here. App callback. So in order to be identified as a callback and inherit all the functions that are available for that callback. So let's see if that works. Again, as you can see, I'm not even refreshing anything. It's everything refreshes automatically. So if I call this, nothing is happening. Okay. Okay. Seems that we're getting in already. Let's see what happens there. Yeah, for some reason, when I'm changing the value, the input value, it's not responding to the update of a plot. Okay, let me test that. If I write scatter, let's see if that is the case. Also, I have a breakpoint here, and it doesn't look like it's getting inside that point. But thank you, Ibrahim. Yes, that's a good point. It's with capital S. So I'm getting inside there. I'm getting the dependency, the input value. Hey, thank you, Ibrahim. Well spotted. I was using the wrong method there. But there you go. I have a plot. Obviously, nothing is going to happen if I change the drop down. But at least, actually, I had the breakpoint in the wrong point. Yes, I can see there that it's actually going through. It's going through there. But you can see that every time that I click here, it's going inside that function. Yes. And in fact, we can create some random points. Let's see if I can do np. Let's import NumPy. And as I import NumPy, let's see if I can do np dot. What's happening here? Oh, okay. There you go. np dot random points. And I want let's see if I can do something like that. Okay. Okay, that seems to be working. Yeah, that's expecting a list. And in fact, I can change the type of plot to any other sort of plot, really. And let me see if I can change this to, I can put the mode equals markers. I think that's the case. Let me see if that works. Anyhow, so I have that. Let's do something more interesting now. And what I'm going to do is read the information from the database and try to put, there you go. We have some markers now rather than the lines. Okay, we can leave it as lines. That's just one line, and I can add another line, and let's call it. That's a way to add another line, and let's add some other random values here. Let's put just pure random values in both. And now I should have two scattered lines, both with the same name, it doesn't matter. So now I want to read the simulation results and plot it in there. And let me remember, there you go. You have some not so nice lines, but these are random values. So whenever I click here, so this is going to generate some random plot because this input is going to trigger a new output. That's all what we are doing here.